At the end of the 19th century, southeastern Tennessee, especially the area of Chattanooga, entered a period of rapid industrial growth. This growth led to the increased need of electricity to operate the iron, textile, and stove manufacturing companies in the area. Ironically, that need could be filled by harnessing the energy of the powerful Ocoee River located in the mountains of Polk County in southeastern Tennessee. Great changes came to the Ocoee River area when an employee of the Chattanooga Railway and Light Company recognized the power-making potential of the area. The ability to dam the river within the high walls of the Ocoee River Gorge was immediately realized. The Eastern Tennessee Power Company was established to construct the Ocoee No. 1 hydroelectric plant. Some 1,500 men were employed on this project, including many immigrants. Parksville, a bustling town, grew up around the construction project for Ocoee Dam No. 1. The town consisted of segregated housing units, stores, shops, and a hotel. Work began on the No. 1 project in August 1910. The plant began operation on January 28, 1912 at 4 p.m. That night, the words Ocoee could be seen glowing in 5-foot-tall letters on the Hamilton Bank building in downtown Chattanooga. A steam plant was added in 1916 to supplement the generation of electricity during the periods of low water. The Ocoee Dam No. 1 created Parksville Lake, Tennessee's first artificial lake. The Eastern Tennessee Power Company changed its name to the Tennessee Power Company in 1912. The company immediately realized the increasing demand for electricity could not be met by the Ocoee Dam. Construction of Ocoee Dam No. 2, a diversion dam, a flume line, and a powerhouse was started near Caney Creek. The old Copper Road, the only means of transportation up the river, was now under the waters of the lake formed by Ocoee Dam No. 1. A very poor road had been constructed around the lake, but it was no more than a wagon road. The railroad to Parksville was still in place, so materials and equipment to build the Ocoee Dam No. 2 powerhouse, flume, and diversion dam were shipped by rail to Parksville and then floated up Parksville Lake to Caney Creek by barge. A wharf was constructed in Parksville and also one near Caney Creek to accommodate the barges. A railroad track was built from Caney Creek Wharf up to the No. 2 Ocoee Dam. At first, a locomotive was used to pull the flat cars loaded with heavy equipment up the tramway. At the completion of the construction, the locomotive was replaced with a trolley car made to transport people. Since transportation around the lake was so difficult, a camp was established for construction workers. The camp was a combination of tents and poorly constructed houses. Later, a nicer community, commonly known as Caney Creek Village, was constructed for workers of the powerhouse. The village of Caney Creek existed from 1912 until the last family left in 1943. Over 70 years have passed since the village closed, but life in Caney Creek lives on in the memories of the few surviving residents. Margaret Poe Trotter was the daughter of Edgar and Gertrude Poe. Mr. Poe was hired as a worker at Caney Creek in the summer of 1934. Margaret entered 7th grade at Caney Creek that fall.
We just started up here, and when we hit the lake there where the first dam is, the road was just a narrow little dirt road and curving. And the further we went around there, my mother said, "Well, if you get me in here, I'll never get out." She didn't like it a little. She was a city girl. But when we saw Caney Creek, Daddy said, now there's our home. The Caney Creek across the river over there. And I'd never seen anything like it, of course. I don't believe there had been. And the house was not quite ready for us to move into. And there was a hotel in Caney Creek. And we were going to stay in the hotel for a few days until the house was ready. I'd never stayed in a hotel. I was thrilled to death to think I'd get to stay in a hotel. And we hadn't been there a few hours, and here came a girl down the sidewalk, told Mother, said, I want Margaret to come and stay with us while you all are waiting for your house to get ready. So I did, and she later became my sister-in-law when we married brothers. But that's how we got there, how we came to find Caney Creek. And
Troy Moore Lingenfelter came to Caney Creek as a sixth grader in 1933. She was the daughter of Walter and Willie Fay Moore.
As a sixth grader, lived at Caney Creek, began to live at Caney Creek. And most of us felt this way. And my mother felt this way, that it was the worst place in the world to live. Because when we moved up there, if you met a car, you had to find a place to pull off to pass. But that didn't last long, no.
And how did it get after that?
Well, when I left there, I thought it was one of the most marvelous places anyone could ever hope to live. And as you get older, I guess you begin to look at things a little differently. But there were 6 of us girls, all the same size, age, not size, and 2 or 3 boys. We had a concrete tennis court with lights. We had a big creek behind us, dammed up, where we could swim, and we could fish anywhere. So I began to look at it differently.
Geraldine Lowe King on the left and Marilyn Lowe Kirkland on the right are 2 of the 6 children of Frank and Ollie Lowe. Marilyn was thought to be the last child born at Caney Creek.
Well, my father was Frank Lowe, Frank Newton Lowe, and he was a machinist, I think. I think that's what they call what he was. And he worked for Tennessee Power, and then when TVA took over from Tennessee Power, well, he worked for them until he retired. So that was our life, you know, till I think we have older sisters, and they remember all about Caney Creek, you know, the tennis court and the Miss McCleary and the hotel. And our oldest sister, Velma, she worked at the hotel with Miss McCleary, and she just always talking about Miss McCleary. She loved her to death, and she had a daughter, and her name was Marilyn Kay. Therefore, that's where I got my name, Marilyn.
Frank Newton Lowe met his future wife, Ollie Jane Runyon, while he was working at Caney Creek.
And when we'd go by there, Mom would look up and say, my husband Jack was with us, and she usually directed it. She said, Jack, I cannot believe that it was up there where Frank proposed to me. Asked me to marry him was the way she worded it. And so it just all started there then. You know, after they did get married, why, they were, I think we lived in 3 houses at Caney Creek before we left.
The second one from the hotel was the one I was born at. My older sister told me that's where I was born, and and probably you. That's what I was going to say. She probably was that. And then it was a lot to do with the size of your family, that you got a bigger house, you know. And so I think we had one of the largest families, so we had, therefore, you know, just one of the bigger houses. Not like now the Mr. Vineyard and all of them. They had the best house, of course, them being the boss. But other than that, that's the way it went. That's the way I understood.
I know there were a lot of children at Caney Creek. Did any of them ever get any mischief?
You know, I'm sure there were a lot of others, but Doc German and I were told. Now, this is what we were told, because I don't think he remembers it, and I certainly do not remember, that he got his name because my friend Marie Gaston and I got under the floor, and we did surgery on 2 kittens, baby kittens. And he and I think his brother sewed them up. But he was the one that used the needle.
You didn't do surgery, did you?
No. And so, but this was the way it was told, you know. And that Doc, so his daddy called him Doc after that. But Mrs. Poe that you talked to told that when I was in high school in my English class, because everyone thought that was so funny. It was so out of line for me. I'm so afraid of anything like that. And a little bug or anything, I wouldn't even go under the floor. But that was what his daddy told, and that's how he goes by Doc till this day. And when anyone from up there sees me, they just usually laugh and put it all together. But I'm not sure
you didn't do it.
If I did it, I have no memory of it. But I'm sure there were many things that we did do, you know, and just no one knew about it. But because children will be children, one thing. One thing I want to say that my memory of Caney Creek will always be that as we grew older, we were able to carry our dad's lunch to him, which was to us was a thrill. And my older sisters, there was a little path up the back. You may have heard this before, but Mom would just get his lunch ready, whatever we were having, you know, and we would carry it up there. And you know, the concrete building that is facing Caney Creek, Dad would stay there, and when we would walk up, we would have his lunch. He'd just reach his hand out that little window. It's still there and that is really is something. I have a wonderful feeling when I go to that powerhouse, because I can just see him waiting for that lunch that morning.
Doc German was born at Caney Creek to Lawrence and Maggie German. He had 4 brothers and sisters. The German family was the last family to leave Caney Creek in 1943.
Now, the people that lived in those houses, most of them, well, all of them worked at the old Tennessee Power Company on the flume line or the powerhouse. My dad was a switchboard operator, but he started out in 1917 working on the flume line. The first house was Bob Green, the second house was Don Gaston, the third house was Lawrence German, fourth house was Walter Moore, the fifth house was Mr. Belt, the fifth house was Vineyards, then the Lowe's and the Merrills and Raymond Roddy and then Mr. Clary run the hotel. Manny Cry and Frank Cry, they lived in those places. Had 14 houses in all, and how we got grocers up there. Otto Stamper would call on Thursdays, regardless of the weather. Now, in the wintertime, I understand these roads is almost impassable. So, summertime, you can get over it pretty easy. And Otto Stamper would call everybody on Thursday, and they'd deliver groceries on Friday. And the men that worked as laborers up on the flume line would come down with flat cars and the little dinky or the train one. They'd carry those groceries across our swinging bridge. Then they'd load them on the flat car and deliver them to all the houses. So it's pretty nice. I guess in those days and time, and my dad also made $26.50 a week in a yellow envelope.
We had one of those yellow envelopes, but it got misplaced. Then the TVA took over and got paying everybody a little better in 1939. And they eventually done with those houses. Everybody moved out in 1941 except Lawrence German and his family. And we lived there 2 years longer than anybody else lived there. So they threatened my dad to farm if he didn't move. But those was happy times.
Anna Ruth Lillard Green was born in 1913. She married Robert Rat Green in 1933. They moved to Caney Creek in 1934. She was interviewed a few days before her 99th birthday.
In there, they refixed your houses anytime you wanted them. They painted them. They remodeled them any way you wanted them. And just like anything you want done, you got it done. It didn't cost you anything, so why not worry about it? Now, when the TV took it over, it was a different horse of a different color. You paid half. That's when the power company owned it. But when the TVA took it over, you paid rent. You paid water bill. You paid everything. And they didn't do anything. Then the first thing we know, get out. We started moving out.
In 1933, Congress created the Tennessee Valley Authority to assist with power generation, flood prevention, and economic recovery from the Great Depression. The Tennessee Power Company did not want to sell to TVA and took the case all the way to the Supreme Court. In 1939, Tennessee Electric Power Company was forced to sell to TVA. In the 6 years leading up to the takeover, life went on as usual at Caney Creek Village.
There was a creek that flowed into the river just below the hotel, and it was dammed up. Some of the men had built a little dam across it and made us a swimming hole. So that's where we spent a lot of our time in the summer times, in that little swimming hole. And people have often asked me, well, what did you do for entertainment? You didn't have this, you didn't have that. We didn't need it. There was one of its kind concrete tennis court just below the hotel with a fence high enough that the balls wouldn't go out into the river or the mountain or anything. And with electric lights around it, and there were little bleachers. We could go watch people play tennis at night. And I can remember some young men from Etowah, Cleveland, Copper Hill coming there to play on that concrete tennis court. So we had just all the advantages anybody would want for that particular period of time, and enjoyed life up there. Oh, it wasn't all much of roses, but there were differences of opinion that would come up. After all, we were just people. But we had also, every summer, we would have picnics behind the powerhouse. There was a big grassy spot back there. And also for entertainment, the children would walk the railroad track all the way down to the little wharf that was built where the river empties into the lake. There was a little wooden wharf, and the railroad tracks went that far. That was to unload and load large pieces of equipment and furniture that could not come across that little footbridge. And they would have to bring it up to the mouth of the river there and put it on a barge and bring it across to it, load it on the little dinghy that had a flat car behind it, and it'd pull it all the way up to the village and beyond too if it was necessary. And the flume line, which so many people have asked me about, was where the water came from the dam up above Caney Creek down to the powerhouse at Caney Creek. And it was rushing. It was not just creeping water. It was very fast. And there were chains built on the inside of that thing every few yards in case someone fell in. They could grab hold of those chains, and there had been incidents when they did that. And also they had to keep the flume line repaired. Rocks would come off the mountain and break a place, open place in the flume line. The water would gush out, so they had to do that too. And the men were kept pretty busy.
I'd like to tell you about Sam Wilcox. He walked 7 miles regardless of the weather with a lantern every morning, every night. Never missed a day. Had his breeches leg rolled up about halfway to his knees. He was laboring on the flume line, a good labor. Back in those days, you had a lot of good workers. And regardless of whether snow, rain, anything come, he'd walk to work every morning with that lantern back every night. I don't never remember a day he missed. And then we only had one or two more. Oh, and by the way, Hugh Smartin and Arthur Reimer run number 3 gatehouse, where the wooden dam is, where they put the rafts in now. Mr. Martin lived upon the bank from the gatehouse, where it's at now, with the bridge across the wooden dam, and Mr. Reimer lived over in the holler. So they made sure that the gates was open going down the flume line. Anyway, you had a little excitement too on Sunday afternoon. Raymond Roddy would come in about half lit, and sometimes with a strange girlfriend, and he'd ride across that swinging bridge about half drunk. Then we'd always watch him. We'd gather up at the swinging bridge to watch him come across that swinging bridge on a motorcycle. Then on Friday evening, he'd leave again, going back to Cleveland or wherever, and taking his lady friend. And of course, as he left, he didn't go across that bridge too fast. But as he came back in, we all used to gather up just to watch him come in. He'd ride that swinging bridge regardless of the weather, if he's doing like that or whatever. And he's a pretty good rider in those days.
Margaret Poe Trotter proudly displayed a quilt made by the women of Caney Creek in 1934. Each piece of the quilt brought back a cascade of memories of her life at Caney Creek. She recognized the patches as material from her dresses and the dresses of her friends. Her dad won the quilt in a raffle to raise money to start a Sunday school for the children of Caney Creek.
Some of these pieces I can remember seeing them, and like I said, there were 1 or 2 in here that were my dresses too. But, that one was, I know. I've just treasured, Mother treasured it, and I treasure it too. And my daughter comes along behind me, will have it next. So, and then I've got a granddaughter that can have it. So I believe in passing things down through the generations to make them a treasure for the family. And this is one of my it's not worth anything much to anybody that started to buy it. I don't know. Well, it's a little antique, of course, but it means more to me than money does. And I wouldn't part with it for anything. But I've been thinking too that we didn't have any church there at Caney Creek. Didn't even have Sunday school for the children. And when we moved there, my mother stood it for about a couple of months, and she said, "Now this has gone far enough. We're going to have Sunday school." So it may be that they did this to raise money, because she sent to Nashville to the Baptist Sunday School Board and told them she was starting a little Sunday school. Would they please send her any old or outdated literature they had for all age groups? So we met in our little one-room schoolhouse, and on Sunday, and I had to go around on Saturday to every house. We're going to have Sunday school tomorrow. We're going to have Sunday school tomorrow. And we thought just the children would come, and we couldn't get everybody in the building. The men, the women, all turned out. So my mother is given credit by a lot of the people who lived there for that Christian influence in her life and the lives of their children. And it's been and I taught my first Sunday school class when I was 12 years old. Mother said, you'll have to teach the little ones. So I did. And as well as teaching school, I've taught Sunday school all my life, just about, till about 10 or 12 years ago, and I had to give it all up. But teaching was my passion. The little one-room schoolhouse was grades 1 through 8 when we moved there, but that was the last year for that because I was in the 7th grade. And in the 8th grade and all through high school, the county began to send a school bus. But we'd have to get up to the bridge, cross over the footbridge and get over to the road to get on, of course. And I remember the man that drove ours was Mr. Dave Reimer lived over at Greasy Creek. But he drove that school bus, and that was a long ride, 54 miles a day, to and from. That was the total.
Caney Creek Village was featured in Ripley's Believe It or Not in the 1920s for being the only town in America with no cars. It had no cars, but it had plenty of children. In the 1940 census, there were 40 children living in Caney Creek Village.
Kids ever played in the river, never bothered. I don't remember why. We never had no trouble keeping kids out of the river. We never hollered, don't go to the river. They didn't go to the river. I don't know why they didn't. The railroad track was there. The train went up and down the railroad track. The kids played up and down the walk, had scotch. They played. They went to school. We didn't have any problems with it.
What we done for fun in Caney Creek, we usually, if we didn't have anything else to do, we'd tie a rope to an old pink bicycle, a Victory bicycle, and we'd ride off in the lake, and Wilbur and Lowe would run alongside it with a rope tied to the bicycle and pull the bicycle out, and I never did learn how to swim. Then we'd done a lot of fighting, you know, like boys do growing up, and I guess that made us pretty tough and smartened us up a whole lot too, and for later in life. And every kid in there about it, all of them mounted quite a bit when they left Caney.
Caney Creek Village has been vacant for almost 70 years. Over the years, the former residents have gathered to reminisce about their lives at the unusual mountain town. In 2010, Margaret Poe Trotter's family took her back to Caney Creek for one final visit.
Anyway, they got me in that raft. You know what I thought? I thought a raft was a flat wooden platform like Huckleberry Finn had. And when I got there and I saw that rubber raft with the big seat right in the middle, it was huge. And I knew I could not possibly get in that thing and sit down. But we had my great-granddaughter, who was 9 then, and 2 other little girls with her. So they pushed and tugged and got me in that little rubber raft to sit down now. Sit down. I held on to both sides. And they all could paddle. There was 3 adults, and they could paddle, and one of the girls could paddle. So they turned around and paddled me to the other shore. It wasn't a long distance, but Eddie knew just exactly how to get to where Caney Creek had been, so he took me and pulled the raft ashore. And I was disoriented. I could not relate that to Caney Creek. But he said, well, come on now, we'll walk up through here. And I couldn't see anything of Caney Creek there, but where we were walking was almost like somebody had deliberately left a pathway, and it's where the old railroad tracks used to run. And when we got to where Caney Creek started, I saw those mossy steps that the old hotel was in front of the old hotel, and I knew then where I was. And my house had been right next door to it. And it was like living it all over again. I could just see in my mind my mom and my daddy and these 3 children gathered around the stove in the wintertime and the old heater or the old table for meals. And Mother, this was the first electric stove she'd ever had. And that's what I learned to cook on too, that old electric stove that she had. But anyway, they got me there, and I just walked past where a few old houses were because I saw the bricks and mortar where it had been our old chimney. And it just was so nostalgic that I said, well, you know, I've seen all I want to see now. I didn't want to dig too deep into those memories that I had of that place and the people that were our neighbors and friends and that we loved so much.
Over the past 7 decades, Doc German has returned to Caney Creek several times. The property is now part of the Cherokee National Forest and is protected by TVA. Before we could film Doc's 2012 return home, permission had to be granted by authorities from both the Cherokee National Forest and TVA. Doc was accompanied by our camera crew, his family members, a Chattanooga Times photographer and reporter, and some TVA employees. There's one thing for certain, Doc is always walking and talking.
Okay, people, I'm going home. If you don't go to my house, follow me.
As Doc returns home, he is flooded with memories from his childhood. He fondly recalls every building and the people who lived at Caney Creek.
Baltimore was a carpenter foreman. Bob Belk was a foreman, and Bill Vineyard was overall of it.
And so this house is a little bit larger because it would be a supervisor's house?
Supervisor's house, and Bill Vineyard's house on down here, it's bigger than all of them. He had a car and my dad had a car. I don't know of anybody else that had a car at that time, which back then, them days was old A-models with high top wheels. We have started out here on Saturday morning going to Cleveland. In wintertime, it'd take us all day to get from the swinging bridge down to Parker. I always had axes in the car. We'd cut down small pine saplings, go in the ruts. Then the next morning you leave early, Cleveland early, get back in that afternoon. In wintertime, summertime we could go on. Now, would you like going down to Bob Belk's house or Bill Vineyard?
Would. I think this is kind of an interesting place, but it's also a sad place because it's like the ghost town of the river that you think about all the people that used to live here and they were so happy and they had a really easy life because they had electricity and had plenty of food to eat and they had a good school and a good church and they were made to move away, but that's sometimes progress is painful, so we have to understand that. This building was the hotel. You can tell that by the foundation. Foundation is much larger than the other foundations, and you have this nice stacked stone. One of the buildings here, or several of the buildings in the Coy system, have this beautiful stacked rock. We also know that we can tell by looking at it that it's got a double fireplace and a lot of supporters to hold up the heaviness of the building. I really don't know what happened to this big building when it was taken down.
And the hotel's right here behind, in front of us.
Okay,
here.
so that's that big foundation.
Yeah, then on the other side is the tennis court, but it's growed up so bad it's pitiful. Big old trees growing up through it.
How many rooms was in the hotel?
I don't know for sure, but I'd say if I was guessing, it's probably 12 to 15. It was real nice. My mother was cooking the hotel.
Did it stay busy? They have a lot of guests?
On weekends.
On weekends?
On weekends.
Okay.
Through the week, very few people unless somebody came. But they'd come pretty often back when Tennessee Power Company owned this thing. You know, visit and take pictures of it. Then TVA bought that in '39. That pretty well ended it.
Doc, how does it feel coming back? Is it a sad feeling? Is it bittersweet?
No, it's real sad, and the biggest thing that bothers me is that everything's growed up. It just growed up just outrageously. And it just, it looks bad, and like it used to look. I remember when it was all clean, which I have pictures of it all been clean. It's growed up. Of course, I understand that's been 70 years. And somebody would have to live here all the time to keep it clean. And so maybe we're fortunate to even see what we see.
While the men at Caney Creek worked hard, the women stayed busy taking care of the children, which included whipping any child that needed it. When asked, "Who spanked you, Doc?" he replied,
"Well, Mrs. Gaston, Mrs. Green, Mrs. Lowe, Miss Merle,
right,
and people like that I still remember to this day. And of course, my mother, she pretty well knew how to use that hickory, and she didn't mind using it. Whoever was around her house."
What was one of those things you got beat for?
Fighting they never did whip us much. We done that every day anyway. Maybe we'd run off, or maybe go up to our house without asking, or go across Swinging Bridge to the road. Of course, we very seldom seen the car back in those days anyway, but we'd ride over them. And we'd ride our bicycles. They didn't want us to ride our bikes, so the main highway, which back then was only a pig trail. Right. So boys always does little things that they need spanking for, you know.
I know that. Now, who's some of those boys that you used to ride around with and get in fights with?
Well, there's Fred Gaston, Gene Gaston, Burns Gaston, Wilburn Lowe, Bernard Woody, G. Cry, Grady Cry, and a few people like that. There's quite a few boys in the village here. A lot of ladies here.
Right.
And one thing I like about all these people in here, all of them, when they left here, they amounted to something.
Right.
I only know of one person that really drank a whole lot. And like I said before, who had a lot of ladies that made school teachers. A lot of the men made switchboard operators. A couple of them made engineers. A couple of them made race car drivers. And I think all in all, we done pretty good for no mountain town like us.
On his return home, Doc continued walking and talking. He told us what happened to the equipment and homes when Caney Creek closed.
Now, I've been told the engine we had here on the railroad track left here back years ago, and they took it apart and took it to what is now known as Dollywood. I've always been told that, and I don't know, but I've been told that. It's a big engine. And round by the powerhouse, they used to have a big trestle running through there and a lot of piling down to the rock float to hold it up. And that railroad track went about 2 more miles down from Caney Creek here, and where they brought stuff in by barges and parked them. And that was a homemade tugboat.
Doc, what happened to the buildings that used to be here?
Well, they sold them all in 1943 or 44, and they hauled them out across the Swinging Bridge. People bought each one of them individually, and I was told they put 3 or 4 of them back together, and I don't know what happened to the rest of them.
Over the period of 9 months, Will Moore filmed former residents of Caney Creek. While at Caney Creek, he reflected on the experience.
I mean, this is something that I would never known about. I would never know this was right here. And like I said, it's one of those things where not many people are left to tell this story. I mean, Dot's probably the youngest one that's here, and there's no telling how long he's left with us or anyone else that's in this, how long they'll be with us. I mean, it's just really sad. I mean, imagine where you live just being gone the next day. It's just non-existent. You have to be cleared out of a nice lifestyle for being replaced with mediocre lifestyle. I mean, one day you're here and next you're gone. It's really kind of a bittersweet story to tell.
To the casual observer, the old foundations of Caney Creek cannot tell the interesting story of the little town on the Ocoee River in East Tennessee. But those foundations are monuments to the former residents of Caney Creek, the hard-working men who were so proud to have jobs during the Depression, the women who enjoyed modern conveniences while dealing with living in the isolated mountains, and the children who had the mountains as a playground and a swinging bridge for a link to the outside world. As time passes on, the memories of the residents of Caney Creek will become as silent as the foundations.